Hi, it's Dr. Alicia Kleiman again. I hope you're enjoying everything as much as me. Next up, we have Amy French. She is a wonderful licensed social worker with the Alzheimer's Association, advocating for Alzheimer's research on a daily basis. She's taken time out of her busy schedule to talk to us about caring for a patient with dementia, helping to relieve caregiver burden.
Hello, I'm Amy French, Senior Manager of Programs and Education for the Alzheimer's Association Tennessee Chapter. Thank you for joining us today. This program is going to talk about caregiving, specifically caregiving for someone who is affected by Alzheimer's disease. This program is brought to you as a part of a grant received by CHI Memorial. We at the Alzheimer's Association are proud to partner. The purpose of the grant, the purpose of this programming, is to help develop a dementia-friendly community here in the Chattanooga and surrounding area. It's so important that the awareness and the education and the support be made available to those who are affected by Alzheimer's disease. In Tennessee, over 120,000 people have a direct diagnosis of Alzheimer's or another kind of dementia. And for those 120,000 people, there are over 357,000 caregivers who provide care. And most of that care is unpaid care by family members and by people in the community. Today, we're going to start by talking about a little about the Alzheimer's Association so that you'll understand who we are and what our role in the community is. So the Alzheimer's Association is a national organization. Our purpose is to provide funding for research, to provide care and support, and to provide education for those who are affected by Alzheimer's and their caregivers. We are a national organization with presence in every community across the nation. Here in Tennessee, we're able to provide support for those affected by Alzheimer's disease through our offices in Nashville, Chattanooga, Knoxville, and Memphis. So through those offices, we're able to provide direct and specific support for everyone in our state. Let's talk a little bit about what the Alzheimer's Association does in addition to raising funds to provide research to find a cure and an effective treatment. Care and support for those who are affected. We say at the Alzheimer's Association that we'll do this as long as it needs to be done. When that happy day comes, that Alzheimer's is no longer an issue in our society, we'll move on to something else. But we're here for you as a community, and we're here to make sure that the education, care, and support is provided. Let's talk first and foremost about what we mean when we say the word caregiver. A caregiver, of course, is anyone who is caring for a loved one. And for the purpose of our conversation today, specifically for anyone caring for a loved one who has Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. That caregiver can be someone who is doing it full time, like a wife or a husband caring for a spouse. It can be someone doing it on a part-time basis, perhaps a friend or a neighbor in the community, or a child, an adult child who may even live a few states away. Of course, the stress is most prominent and most unrelenting for those who are providing full-time caregiving. But we also need to be aware that those who are providing care, even on a temporary or interim basis, that stress is very real and very important to be managed appropriately so that good quality of life can be assured not only for the person you're caring for, but for you yourself as a caregiver. Now that we have a better understanding of what we mean by the term caregiver, let's talk a little bit about what we mean by the term Alzheimer's and dementia. So just sort of a broad, basic overview. And I think it's very important that we understand what we're talking about as caregivers, what we're dealing with here. We need to understand very clearly what's happening to the brain and what the disease process is for a person who's affected by Alzheimer's disease, for our loved ones who are suffering from this disease. We fear what we don't understand, and we tend to respond sometimes much more emotionally or much more off the cuff if we don't really understand what's happening around us and to our loved ones. So understanding what Alzheimer's is an important part of being a caregiver. Alzheimer's disease is not a normal part of aging, and Alzheimer's disease is one of many different forms of dementia. So think of dementia as the umbrella term. Dementia is not in and of itself a diagnosis. Dementia describes a set of symptoms. Just as there are different kinds of cancer, there are different kinds of dementia. Under that dementia umbrella falls Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, Lewy body. There's probably, 30 or 40 different kinds of dementia that fall under that umbrella term. So what makes something dementia? What are the symptoms of dementia? It's really pretty simple. Dementia is defined by two primary symptoms. One being the inability to retain information or memory loss that is significant enough to interfere with normal day-to-day life. And the other symptom is the inability to process information, to use the information that comes at you on all levels in a productive and appropriate way, to the degree that it interferes with normal day-to-day life. So we're looking at an umbrella term called dementia that describes a set of symptoms, that being memory loss significant enough to interfere with normal day-to-day life, and the inability to process information that interferes with normal day-to-day life. Now, how do you know if you have Alzheimer's or dementia when we all forget things? Well, we all do forget things. We forget why we walked into the kitchen and go sit down on the couch and remember, and then go back and get our glass of water or whatever we walked into the kitchen for. It's a very common thing. We're busy. Our brains process a lot of information all the time, 24/7. So what you look for in determining whether or not there's a problem in regard to using information and remembering information is changes. Changes that interfere with your normal day-to-day life. An example of that would be, well, for me personally, I'm not good with numbers. I'm terrible with numbers. I can't remember phone numbers. I get numbers transposed. So if you ask me to do a math problem and I don't do a very good job, that's not unusual for me. It's not a change. So it wouldn't be an indication necessarily of any kind of problem with cognition or an indication that dementia might be present. On the other hand, I happen to be a very good cook. So if I began to have problems following a recipe or putting together a meal, and it became problematic for me, something that I love to do that I feel like I'm pretty good at, that would be a change. And while it may not be that change is due to dementia, that will be a red flag. That will be a reason for me to talk to my primary care physician and figure out what's going on. Hopefully, there will be another reason, another medical reason that could be addressed that wasn't dementia. But if dementia is present, which will be determined by additional testing, then I could address it early on. So early detection, early diagnosis, early intervention is very vital to the management of this disease. So now we've talked about who the Alzheimer's Association is, what a caregiver is, and what dementia is. So let's put that all together and talk about Alzheimer's in regard to care provided by you and me, the caregivers. So caring for a person who has Alzheimer's is extremely stressful. If you're a caregiver and you've joined us today, I'm not telling you anything new. You're very aware of that. The reason that it's so stressful is because it's hard. I often tell people when they come to me and talk about the challenges they're having as caregivers, I will say to them, the reason it's hard is because it's a hard job. It's hard to be a caregiver for someone, especially those caregivers who are providing care 24/7. And with Alzheimer's disease, because it changes the personality and the capability of someone that you've probably known for a very long time and come to have expectations in regard to how they function in the world and how you interact with them, that makes it very complicated. So there's physical challenges in being a caregiver, especially as the disease progresses. Your loved one is probably going to need assistance with hands-on things like personal care, remembering to take medications, even how to get dressed, how to basically function in the world and get along, how to eat. Things like that, as the disease progresses, are very real challenges that are common. And there's also the challenge of communication. When you, as a caregiver, as a care partner for someone throughout life, especially spouses who experience this and adult children, the changes that happen to your loved one, they may look perfectly fine on the outside, but what's going on in their brain through the disease process is really changing the way that they interact, the way that they interpret the world and respond to the world, and the way that they communicate with you. I explain to caregivers often that when a person has Alzheimer's, it's like they live on the other side of the street. They are not on the same side of the street as you with your healthy brain. Because of the damage that's done through the disease process, these individuals experience the world differently. They interpret the world differently. They respond to the world differently. And caregivers, because we love that person and we want them back, we miss the person that they were before the disease, we often try to bring them back to our side of the street. Oh, honey, you remember how to put your pants on. You know how to do this. Now, come on, you can do this. And we try to be encouraging and try to bring them back. But the fact of the matter is, the reality is, they can't come back to our side of the street. They would if they could. They try really hard. And we would bring them back if we could. We try really hard. But the best way to continue that relationship for us as caregivers is to go to their side of the street. To do the best we can to anticipate what the world looks like and feels like and sounds like and how they are going to respond to it. That's a huge challenge. It's a 24/7, unrelenting challenge. And not only is it challenging 24/7, it can change in the way it looks from morning to evening. People who have Alzheimer's don't act the same 24/7. They respond to things that you and I respond to. If they're tired, their dementia, their symptoms are going to be more pronounced. Just as with ourselves, when we're tired, we don't respond. We may have less patience. We may have more irritability. We may just not be as sharp as we were in the afternoon as we were in the morning. So those things are very common. And in many respects, the changes that occur with your loved one who has Alzheimer's are not a whole lot different than they are for you and I. They're just sort of on steroids. They're just on a much more intense level. And while we can, after a good night's rest, bounce back a lot more easily, sadly, those who have Alzheimer's cannot bounce back like we do. So being a caregiver, again, stress. When I have this conversation with caregivers in person, I don't have to ask them, how do you know if you're stressed? We know because we feel it, right? But let's talk about what those symptoms look like, though, what the symptoms look like for being a stressed out caregiver. Well, common symptoms of stress: anxiety, depression, exhaustion, the inability to get a good night's sleep because either you're worried or you're exhausted and you can't sleep, or your loved one is having behaviors that make it difficult for you to sleep. Perhaps overeating, overdrinking, weight loss, or weight gain. Those things can definitely be symptoms. A feeling of hopelessness, social isolation. inability to have the same enjoyment that you once did in activities that you used to enjoy, like gardening or socializing with friends and so forth. All of those things are definitely symptoms of being a stressed out caregiver. And I'm sure that each of you can check on the list probably many of those symptoms. In talking about those symptoms, it's important that we identify them. It's important that we recognize what's going on with ourselves as caregivers. It's important because we are worth it. We are worth the time and energy and attention to take care of ourselves. And just as importantly, if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't make sure that we as individuals are as healthy and functioning as maximally as we can, then we really can't be the best caregiver that we can be. And we all want to be the best, right? We all want to be the best we can be, our best selves, and our best selves as a caregiver. So finding ways to manage that stress is a huge challenge. And in many ways, trying to find ways to practice that self-care that everybody tells you should do is yet another stressor. It can be stressful, and I see it on caregivers' faces when I have this one-on-one conversation with them. I say things like, you really need to take care of yourselves. And I see almost a little acceleration and anxiety thinking, I know that's one more thing I'm supposed to be doing is taking care of myself. So today, as we talk about self-care, I want to kind of take it down a notch and not focus on yet another thing that you should be doing as a caregiver, taking care of yourself. Let's take it down and talk about some simple ways, some maybe not so life-altering ways. Now, ideally, you'd join a yoga class, right? Ideally, you'd be sure that you had a good night's sleep every night and a good, solid, nutritious meal every day, and all the social stimulation and all the spiritual stimulation that you need. Ideally, that's what you would do. But you live in the real world. You live in caregiver world. So doing that does not come easy. And newsflash, it doesn't come easy even for people who aren't caregivers, right? If it came easy for everyone, then no one would be stressed out. But that's not the case. So let's talk about those little things that we can do each day, those moments we can steal away that will help us decrease our stress level. So there are some really basic, simple things that we can do in the course of our caregiving day. First of all, ask for and accept help. When you're caring for a loved one who has Alzheimer's, there's often a lot of physical things that you have to do. You may have to make sure that person gets bathed and groomed. You may have to make sure that person gets his or her medication. You may have to be sure that he or she gets to a physical therapy appointment or a doctor's appointment. All of those things are things that are important. But a lot of those things are things that you yourself don't have to be the one to do. So there is help out there. A really important way to help reduce your stress is to reduce the demands that you have on yourself as a caregiver. And while we as caregivers often think, well, he won't do it for anybody else. I have to be the one to do it. He'll only do it for me. Sometimes you'll be surprised if you give other people the opportunity and you give him or her the opportunity to interact with that person in a productive way. Oftentimes it's very successful. So it's sort of like leaving your child at kindergarten, right? All moms who leave their child at kindergarten, we worry, oh my goodness, he's crying. And then if we peek in the window 20 minutes later, the child's doing fine. And oftentimes that's the case with your loved one and a caregiver who may not be you yourself. So seek out those opportunities to get help. If you do not have a friend or family member who can help you with those things, there are some resources out there, and we will talk more about that a little bit later, but a really good go-to resource that's sort of a clearinghouse for all things caregiving is your local area agency on aging and disability. So if you don't know about your local area agency on aging and disability, Google it. Google it or give the Alzheimer's Association a call and we'll help you get in touch. They can provide a lot of information about resources that are out there, some very low cost and affordable. So don't hesitate to reach out for that help. And when people offer, take their offer up. When your friend says, let me know if I can do anything, don't hesitate to say something like, well, actually, if you can come and stay with my husband while I run to the grocery store, that would be great. Now, reality will strike, and oftentimes that individual may quickly rethink it and make up an excuse or have a legitimate excuse that they can't do that. And that's okay. But the next time that happens, take the next person up on that. And with not a whole lot of effort, I think you'll be able to find some help that you maybe didn't have on your radar. So let's also talk about things that we can do in our normal day-to-day life. For one thing, people who have Alzheimer's oftentimes have a good time of day, a time of day when they function better than other times. For most people, it's the morning, and that makes sense. Again, we're all more rested in the morning. We're all free of having had to deal with everything from morning to afternoon, when afternoon can be harder for all of us. So if the morning time is better, then use that time for the hard task. Use that time for bath time. Use that time for things that have to be done. Make your doctor's appointments early so that your loved one and you are not exhausted in the late afternoon for a doctor's appointment. So doing things at the time of day that is best for your loved one and for you as well is really important. It's also important to be attuned to what's happening, those little subtle clues that you and your loved one are going to display when you begin to become a little bit more stressed. It's important to remember as a caregiver that whatever task you're doing, it doesn't have to be necessarily completed all at one time. An example of that would be, for instance, if bath time can be challenging for your loved one, if getting a shower can be a real challenge. I have a good friend who often says, nobody ever died of being stinky. And what she means by that is when you're caring for someone who has Alzheimer's, if Thursday you're trying to give your loved one a bath and he or she is clearly not in the mood, if they're not responding well, if you're getting frustrated, if he's getting frustrated, it's okay to stop. It's okay if maybe you only got to the feet on Thursday. Maybe Friday or Saturday you'll get to the rest of the body. So give yourself a break. Give your loved one a break. Pace yourself. Be aware of where you are emotionally, where you are energetically wise, and where they are on both of those planes as well. So getting help, being gentle on yourself and your loved one in regard to what you think has to be done, when it has to be done, those are all things that are very, very important. And just taking care of yourself from a physical point of view, making sure that you're hydrated. We're filming this in the middle of summer and it's really hot outside. And most people are really bad about not drinking all that water. So find ways to help keep yourself hydrated and your loved one hydrated. Little cues, have a container that you keep with you at all times, things like that. Good nutrition, keeping healthy food choices available for snacks and for meals is really important. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate. It can be simple and should be simple. Don't put pressure on yourself to fix a big dinner meal every evening. Maybe a quick salad that's put together. Nutritious, healthy, and stress-free. So think about those ways that you can help yourself maintain your own health. Getting a good night's sleep is really a challenge for caregivers. If your loved one is having difficulty sleeping, talk with your primary care physician about that, or with his primary care physician about that. If you're having challenges sleeping, again, talk with your physician about that. Many of the things that we accept as caregivers, because we're so stressed out and don't have time to deal with it, are things that can be changed with a little difference in our thought process. So think about simple ways you can reduce your stress. A good example of that might be, for me, back in the days when I had to commute to work. We all work remotely now, but in the past, when I had to commute to work, the interstate stressed me out. So even though it took me 5 minutes longer to get to work by going back roads, it was just less stressful. So that was 5 minutes of stress both ways that I was able to spare myself. So sparing yourself in those small, simple ways can really make a huge difference. So now that we've spent some time talking about Alzheimer's and what it is and caregiving and some of the stressors that go with being a caregiver, let's make a transition. I'd like to have us spend some time talking with my good friend Jan Pretty, who is a caregiver herself. Jan and I have known each other about 3 years.
Yes.
And Jan is the caregiver for her husband, who has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease.
Yes.
Jan and I know each other through support groups and education programs
Right.
that the Alzheimer's Association provides. And we want to share a little bit with you about what that experience is like from Jan's perspective as a caregiver. So Jan, let's just start from the beginning.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about what the process was and how things came about that Don received his diagnosis.
Well, Don was in the military for 40 years, and he was a helicopter pilot.
Okay.
And he was a helicopter pilot in the military because he wanted me to learn how to land an airplane, and I did and got my license, and I was a better pilot than he was. He couldn't quite handle that, so he joined the National Guard. Long story short, he got activated. So he flew helicopters for 35 years, and we were on a trip back to St. Louis in 2011, where we used to live. And he said, we're going north, aren't we? I said, no, Don, we're going west. I said, you're a pilot. You always know the direction that you're traveling. He said, but I feel like we're going north. And then we got to St. Louis, and we'd lived there for 4 years. And he did not remember anything about St. Louis. And we were on the interstate, and I said, well, right there's where you used to work. And we came to another exit, and I said, right there is where we lived. We lived on that street. He said, I don't remember any of it. Well, that was just kind of a
red flag.
What's going on here? But then everything kind of went back to normal. And then maybe months later, or maybe even a year later, there would be something else that I would go, that's just not quite normal for him. But to be truthful, you think. I had a friend whose husband had Alzheimer's, and I called her up and talked to her. I said, well, what do I need to look for? Those kinds of things. And she was just sharing a little bit with me. But truthfully, I wanted to deny it. It can't be. He's just getting older. So I just kind of denied it and pushed it down. And then about 5 years ago, I thought, no, I really do think we need to go to the doctor and get some more wisdom here as far as what's happening to him. So we did, and that was an experience too, because he only had this primary care doctor for about a year. So the doctor really didn't know him that well. But I took him in, and I've kind of explained what I had been experiencing with him for a few years. And he said, oh, yes, he has Alzheimer's. And I went, just like that? Just like that he has Alzheimer's? He said, oh, yeah, that's what he's got. I said, we're not going to do any tests or anything like that. And he says, no, it's not necessary. Not necessary? No. I said, is there any kind of medication we can give him? Well, there is, but it doesn't work. And this just absolutely blew me away. And I thought, no, I think I need to find another primary care doctor.
Good for you.
So I did. And he's our present primary care doctor, and he's been very, very supportive. He had CAT scans done and MRIs, all the tests that a person with Alzheimer's receives. And so I'm blessed to have a doctor who is working with me as far as his health is concerned. But that was about 5 years ago when the diagnosis was made.
And Jan, unfortunately, the experience that you had is not uncommon. While we would like to think and assume that everyone in the medical profession really understands this disease, that's not the case. And you did such an outstanding job of not simply accepting what just didn't feel right to you instinctively. And I'm so proud of you for that. And I encourage all caregivers, if you do not have that medical professional champion that you have to have that will help walk you through this, then as Jan did, you seek someone else out. And the Alzheimer's Association can help with that if that's a challenge. So, I think that having that whole village
Yes.
is so important. You're the primary caregiver, but in your village, you have a healthcare professional that gets it, that you can communicate with, and you also understand that you have to communicate on Don's behalf now.
Right.
That he cannot accurately explain what's going on or report what's going on. So that relationship with the doctor is so very important. Yes. So if we're going to use the analogy of a village, what else is in your village as a caregiver?
Well, I had a friend who was a part of the support group that you are in charge of, and her husband has Alzheimer's. And of course, when you find someone that's in the same situation that you are, it's easy to communicate with one another. And so she said, I really think it would be beneficial for you to come to this support group. I said, fine. When is it? Where is it? What time? And so we joined the support group, and that was a godsend. That really was a godsend. All the information that you provide that I didn't even realize I needed. That's what was so neat, because I hadn't even thought about that. You only think, I think anyway, for me personally, you only kind of think about things in increments. You don't think long range.
Yeah, you just don't have the energy.
No, because you're just thinking, what do I do today with this? Not what do I need to think about 5 years from now, but there are some things that you need to think about long term. And so that was excellent support for me to just put those things in order. And then just being with the people. Even though you don't know them well, you bond because you're in the same boat. And you're able to immediately have that conversation of what you're experiencing. And what is so neat is some of these people are down the road from me. And so I can discuss things with them, and they'll go, well, this is what you might experience, which is good to know what may happen down the road. And then, of course, there are people that are behind you that you in turn can minister to them what you have learned through the experience of being a caregiver.
And I love how you explain that. You're on your journey, but there's people ahead of you and there's people behind you, but we're all on that same journey together. And we not only get help, but helping each other. And that's very valuable. It's very gratifying to know that your interactions not only help you, but you help someone else. And when you help someone else, you always end up helping yourself too. So that's a pretty cool way for things to proceed as well.
Right.
And I love what you said too. Your social needs can and do get met to a large degree through the support groups.
Yes.
And I would imagine this is true for most caregivers. Your social circle becomes very different after a diagnosis. And it can be pretty lonely if you don't have that support.
Yes, that was very interesting. When I got the diagnosis, I would call people that are good friends, and they're still good friends, and explained what they had been experiencing with Don, but didn't have a name to it.
Yes.
And that was interesting because the friendship is kind of now at a distance. Not anything against them personally, because I understand that they don't know how to relate in the situation, which is fine. I mean, it is fine. But your social circle does narrow down to just certain people. And so the support group is really wonderful in that vein.
Well, I'm so glad that that the support group became a part of your life, and it's been such a valuable part. And I think that in our early stage support group, there are different support groups that the Alzheimer's Association offers. Some are just for caregivers, but the one that Jan is a part of is actually for people in the earlier stages. And it is an opportunity for both the caregiver and the person with Alzheimer's to participate in together. And that social aspect of it, as well as the support aspect of it, is such an important part of it.
Yes.
So I think that I'd like to sort of wrap things up a bit by just asking you, as a caregiver, if you were Ann Landers and could give advice, What would you say to a person who has some concerns that their loved one might be having some problems or who might already be on this journey?
If they're not sure, seek out your primary care doctor and let him guide you. What I would advise, what I've learned from my own personal experience as far as a caregiver, and I hope that it relieves stress. You have to know yourself. And I am a very goal-oriented person. And once that goal is completed, that's it. I'm done with it. Pack it up. We'll move on to the next goal. I have learned that's not possible anymore. Because when I button up something, Don comes along and unbuttons it. He doesn't know that he's unbuttoning it. And at first I would get very upset, because I finished this. I don't want to be bothered with this anymore. It is done. It's in the bucket. Just leave it be. But it's over and over and over. And so anymore, I just go, it's not worth it. It is just not worth it. Let it go.
Choose your battles.
Let it. No, I don't even choose battles anymore.
You don't even have battles.
I don't even choose battles.
Good.
Like I'll say, for instance, don't leave the doors open because flies come in. He doesn't remember it. He leaves the doors open. I let it go. I don't even say anymore, don't leave the doors open, because I know he's going to forget. So I just come behind him and I do whatever needs to be done. Therefore, I'm not under the stress of trying to change his behavior, because I can't change his behavior. I can't. There's no way. So as a caregiver, I just come behind him and take care of it.
And I think that all goes back to what I was talking about earlier of, you've found ways to be on his side of the street.
Yes, absolutely.
And as a result of that wonderful gift and hard work on your part, you still have a very satisfying and good relationship,
yes,
a good quality of life together.
Right.
And I think that's what we all want
right
at the end of the day.
Yes.
Dan, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for inviting me.
Personal story and so much wise and good advice to those who are traveling this journey as well. We want to thank you for joining us for this program. We hope that you have found some useful information, some insights, and perhaps even a little stress relief as well. Please know that there are resources available for help through the Alzheimer's Association. We're available 24/7, 7 days a week, 365. And we can be reached through our toll-free number, our website at www.alz.org. Once you contact us, I'll get in touch with you personally if you're in my area. And if you're not in my area, then my counterpart will get in touch with you personally, and we can help you walk through this journey. That's why we're here. Remember that you do not have to do this alone. Reaching out, taking advantage of the opportunities that you have for help is so very important. And perhaps if I could leave you with one thought, with one idea, it's that you are awesome. What you're doing as a caregiver, you're doing a great job. We often feel like we're not. We often question ourselves and doubt ourselves. But please know that what you're doing is hard, and you are rocking it. Keep doing what you're doing. Reach out for the help that you need. And until we meet again, take care.